Hello everyone, this is Julia. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about my current watercolor field kit, so my sketching palette. And this is the palette that I'm using currently for my sketchbook work outside, so when I'm out in the field, nature journaling, and also when I work in my studio. So I do have a bigger palette that I keep around just in case I need another color, but most of the time I end up using this smaller one too. And you can see there are a few basic colors in this, and I'm going to talk about this now. So you will notice that this small metal palette has sort of like a lot of colors. So right now there are 23 pens in it, and that's a little bit more than you usually have in these sort of field kits. I know people that are very happy with just 8 or 12 or 16 colors, so I do have 23 pens, and I like to... So I recently got some new paints, and I really love to experiment with them. So some of these are actually sort of like double colors that I wouldn't particularly need, but I'd rather try these than just store them in a box somewhere. So yeah, usually you wouldn't really need more than maybe 16 or even 20 colors to mix most of the colors that you need or you can think of. I prefer to use these sort of small metal palettes, and it's just because I find mixing on them is a little bit easier than on these plastic palettes. Plastic can be slightly lighter, but I think when you have these kind of small palettes, then it doesn't really matter. So, but I really find that the paint sits on these plastic surfaces in little small drops instead of one larger puddle. And let me quickly show you what I mean by this. So if I take a little bit of yellow, or if I reactivate this, then you can see this stays in a nice big puddle that I can pick up paint from. And this is usually what doesn't happen when you have a brand new plastic palette. So this is definitely a thing to think about in your palette. So both variants of palettes, plastic and metal, stain a little bit after a while. I don't really care about this too much because I usually don't make illustrations. So when I need to do illustrations that have to have really exact colors, then I use a little sort of scrap paper that I test my colors on, or I use a ceramic plate to mix. So here you can see this is one of the larger palettes that I have here. Here you can see it's a very high-priced metal palette by Schminke, and you can see the staining that has taken place, mainly from the phthalo blues and greens. That and if you have some trick to get this out of a metal palette, then please let me know. I have tried different tricks like scrubbing it very lightly with vegetable oil and all kinds of erasers, but nothing has really, I mean, it doesn't really bother me, so I haven't tried really many things. So these paints are all artist grade paints. When I started painting a few years ago, I used student grade paints because they were, I just wanted to try out if I liked watercolor, and so I didn't want to buy the expensive paints right from the start. But now that I've stuck with watercolor, I've been replacing these bit by bit with these artist grade paints, and it's really I think almost everyone will tell you this, that it's you should really get the best paint quality that you can afford. And also it's important to mostly get single pigment paints that will mix well and stay a little bit brighter when you mix them. So when choosing paints, think about this, and also don't go by the color's name. You might have heard this, but by the pigments. So I have noted these pigments here. I also have a blog post on my palette. So if you want to check a few of these pigments and what I actually put in this, then you can find this on my blog. It's a little bit of a deep dive if you've never heard about these different pigments and why it's important to do so. Then there are a few great resources on the web. I've also linked these in my blog post. So if you're in for a few calm afternoons that you can spend diving into really sort of the science of watercolor, then I really recommend this. I mainly work with Schminke paints, Schminke Horadam, because since I'm in Germany, I can get them for a really decent price. I know they're really expensive in North America, so yeah, they are not in Germany, so that's why I get them. They are really high quality paints. I also use some Winsor & Newton and sometimes the odd Daniel Smith, whereas I have to say the Daniel Smith is really overpriced here. So we have the advantage of getting Schminke at good prices, but Daniel Smith is really, it's 2 or 3 times sometimes a tube than what I can get Schminke for. So, but all of these paints have great quality, and this is just what I use. So another thought about this is what I use thing is you can watch lots of these videos. So what's in my palette, what's in my field kit, you can read a lot about other artists' choices, but one thing that you will do in the end probably is make your own experience and your own color choices, and I really hope that you will do. And so I think assembling a palette is a really personal thing, and you will find which pigments work well for you and for your work and your art. So it's the best tip I can really give you is to experiment with everything, and sometimes also the things that I told you don't work well for you. So this is how you learn, this is how you make your own experience. I might choose colors for different reasons than you might do. So I love transparency and brightness in my colors. I like to layer a lot in my illustration work. So I tend to get transparent pigments over opaque pigments. And this is just another thing that you can learn about pigments. They have different qualities, different characteristics. Some of these stain, as I explained earlier. You can see this when you remove the paint from your palette. Also when you try to remove the paint from your paper, then some of these lift easily and some of these just stay in the paper. So these are just some of the qualities of pigments. There are also paints that granulate. That means the pigments sort of they make these little groups that stay together, and they sort of sit in the texture of the paper, and it looks like a really interesting effect. And I usually, I'm not a big fan of granulation. I enjoy it from time to time, but I can't really use it when I'm doing more realistic illustrations. So I keep my granulating colors really to a minimum. I still like to experiment, so at the moment I have this Schminke Maroon in my palette. Also this Cerulean Blue is a granulating paint, and I think all of the others are not granulating. So I really enjoy this Cerulean Blue for skies and for clouds, and also when you mix this maroon with one of the blues, then you get a really nice neutral that you can use for clouds or rocks. And this is something that I love for sketching and for journaling, but not so much when I do maybe a realistic bird illustration or an insect. So this is also one of the cases where you have to decide what you're going for, what you want to have your artwork to look like. I also don't have a real black in my palette, so I have two different grays, as you can see. So the one I'm using the most is Schminke Neutral Gray. And this is really great because it doesn't contain a black pigment. And again, I think that using a paint with black in it can sometimes be a little bit too much. So it can, particularly when you render areas like eyes and you slap down a lot of black, then it can look a little bit, you know, lifeless and almost a little bit dead. And I certainly don't want this in my bird illustrations. Then I also have a Payne's Gray. I really don't use it that much, but I have it here because it's nice to have when you need a sort of a black that can be toned down and brought down from this being very dark. So basically you can see that I have in my palette sort of taken a standard approach. So I have a warm and a cool version of each primary color plus a few convenience colors like these greens, violet, and some earth tones and gray and darker gray. So you can, as I said, you can definitely choose a great palette with only 12 or 16 colors, so don't let my really big palette sort of influence you. I'm just not very good at excluding too many paints, so I really want all of them to be around. I have here in my studio, I have this big palette with 48 wells. You see some of these are taken out, as I have them in my smaller field kit, but I really like to have all of my colors in one place so that I can use them all if I need them. So let's take a quick look at each of the colors in this palette. So let's start with this one. This is Schminke Vermilion. This is an opaque, semi-opaque red, and it's also semi-staining. It's a good warm red for mixing. Then next to this we have Winsor Red, which is the Pyrrole Red, so PR254. This is a semi-transparent staining cool red, so you can see from the two red tones I have a warm and a cool red. And then I also have, this is Schminke Ruby Red, so this would be my quinacridone pink. So this is a really very nice semi-transparent, semi-staining pink. That's another cool pink that is great for mixing purples and pinks and oranges. Then next is my Winsor & Newton Winsor Violet, which is dioxazine violet. This is a rather staining violet, but it's really transparent. It's a purple, so it's great for shadows. And to mix with other colors. Then I have my Winsor Cobalt Blue. This is one of my favorite blues. It's a semi-transparent and rather warm blue. So I usually use Cobalt Blue over ultramarine because the sky where I live looks more like a diluted cobalt blue, and I really like that it's sort of, it's a very light, soft blue. Then I have Talos, so this is Schminke Talo Blue. This is a staining or semi-staining, transparent sort of greenish blue. It's a cyan, sort of close to the primary cyan, and this is a very good mixing color, but it's really intense, so you only need a very, very small amount of it. I use it sparingly, but sometimes it can really come in handy. I might kick it out at some point, but right now I'm liking it for mixing. So you can do really great green mixes with this one as well. The next row is Schminke Transparent Yellow. This is PY150. So this is semi-staining, transparent, warm yellow that changes from a really, you can see it here, from a really brownish dark to a light warm yellow when it's diluted. Then I have Schminke Chrome Orange, which is PO62. So this is a semi-transparent, semi-staining orange, and this is just a middle tone between these reds and the yellows. So when I need an even darker yellow, then I mix in a little bit of orange, and usually that looks quite about right. Then I have a convenience green. This is Schminke Olive Green Yellow, and this is a mix. So this is a staining, semi-transparent warm green. It's great for certain types of foliage and certain types of birds, which is why I have it here. I can probably take it out soon because in the summer I don't really need it that much. And I have noticed that it's sort of, it says that it's semi-transparent, but it's more like semi-opaque for me. So it has a little bit too much body. The next one we have is Schminke May Green, which is another convenience green. It's another mix, so it's great for the spring leaves, for foliage. It's a warm, bright green. Then I have here my Winsor & Newton Cerulean Blue Red shade. So this is PB36. It's a semi-opaque, cool blue, and it's absolutely great for skies, at least where I live. So it has the slightest bit of granulation, and I really love to use it for blue. So it's really a light, airy blue. Then in the next row we have Schminke Lemon Yellow, PY3, which is a semi-transparent, semi-staining cold yellow. So you have the warm and the cold yellow here. And this is a great primary yellow for mixing. Then we have Winsor & Newton Yellow Ochre, and this is a semi-opaque earth yellow, similar to raw sienna, and I will probably switch this out at some point because I have noticed that when Winsor & Newton says this is semi-opaque, then they mean this is semi-opaque, and I really don't like that it makes this, this chalky look. I have a few paints, a few colors that are similar to this. I know that Schminke has a few great transparent colors like this, so transparent earth tones, and I think I will replace it with this one soon. So probably when it's empty. By the way, I always refill my pans from tubes, so I don't buy pans because it's not very cost effective. The next one is Winsor & Newton Green Gold, which is a warm, transparent yellow-green. It's also great for mixing with other greens. It's a little bit lighter, as you can see, than the olive. It's almost like this transparent yellow. So these are really close together on the color wheel. The next one is my Taylor Green. This is also by Schminke. This is non-staining, semi-transparent, cool green. This is one of the colors, like all Taylor colors, that I never use on their own. It's a great color for mixing with yellows or with reds or with blues, but if you want to, look at it, you don't want to use it on your own. At least not in any sort of sketch where you have where you want to depict natural things. Then I have Schminke Perylene Green, which is actually a black pigment. So this is you can see this is a really dark green pigment. It is semi-staining, opaque, a dark green, almost black. It's great for shadows, great for bringing black into your greens, into plants. So this is where I usually use this. Then I have Schminke Neutral Gray in this larger pan here. So as I said, this is made without black pigment. It is made from, I think, PR255, PO62 and PB60. So I think this would be actually two of these I have in my palette. This is vermilion, then this chrome orange, and the last one is Indian Throne Blue, I think, which I don't have in my palette. But this is a neutral gray, which is really great for mixing and for painting dark areas that you want to keep alive and not so dull. Then down here in the last row, I have a large pan of Daniel Smith Buff Titanium. So this is one of the few paints that I have gotten from Daniel Smith because I love it very much. And this is semi-transparent pale light brown. It's a favorite of mine for painting sand or these light areas of birds. It's really great for that. Then I already mentioned my Schminke Maroon Brown. This is semi-opaque, non-staining, warm earth tone. It's a little bit like burnt sienna, but a little bit lighter, and it's granulating. So I'm currently experimenting with this. I already told you that when you mix it with cobalt blue, then you can get a nice neutral, which I can actually show you because I have it here on my mixing area. So this is what you get when you mix these two. And yeah, I'm currently trying out a few things with this. Then we have Schminke Transparent Amber. This is a variety of PR101. So this is a staining transparent warm brown. It's a little bit cooler than the maroon brown, but it's great for mixing. Then I have another Daniel Smith. It's raw amber. This is sort of the only raw amber that I can get that has that is not a warm brown but a cool brown. So this is a staining, semi-transparent, deep cool brown, which is sort of, it's a little bit difficult to mix, and this is why I like having this around. Like I have these warm browns and then this cool brown. Then I have Winsor & Newton Davies Grey here, and this is actually a really bad convenience grey, which I'm a little bit ashamed to have in my palette. It's sort of like a guilty pleasure. So I'm not sure where I was introduced to it. It's actually not that great a color. It's a slightly greenish light grey, and it's semi-opaque, and yeah, it has this green cool tint. It's nice to have around, but it's not really essential. I'm pretty sure I could mix something similar to this by mixing, neutral gray and buff titanium. So I will probably, and it's also really hard to reactivate because it's made by Winsor & Newton. So I will probably replace it or just leave it out of my palette in the future. But what I like it for is light areas and light shadows in birds. So that is what I use it for. And then the last color that I have here in my field kit is Schminke Payne's Grey, which is your classic Payne's Grey. It's a semi-staining, semi-opaque, cool, dark gray mix. I use it instead of black. So whenever I need sort of a dark area in my sketches, then I use this Payne's Grey. Yeah, so as I said, this is just my palette. This is by no means a perfect palette. I already mentioned a few things that I would likely change or do differently in the future, and you will probably, if you assemble your palette, you will probably change it again over time. This is a perfectly normal process. So when you add or switch color, then consider things as light fastness, transparency, or staining or granulation, really what's important for you, and also how much you actually use it. I thought I would use some of these really a lot, and I figured out I don't. So it makes sense to switch them around, because you're carrying around colors with you that you don't really need doesn't make a lot of sense. So my final tip for you would to be not to go out and buy these paints, but use the paints that you have and get to know them. So find out about the pigments and experiment with different mixes. See how the colors are made, what pigments are in them. And you can always do a slightly different palette than me. That's totally fine. One thing that I really like is having a warm and a cool color of each of the primaries, and a few like these greens and these earth tones, so that I have a bigger range. But every artist has a different palette, and that's totally okay. Yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want to read more details and see all the pigment numbers and all the descriptions, then head over to my blog. I will link the blog post below. Yeah, and if you enjoyed this, let me know if you want to see more videos like this in the future. So yeah, I hope we will see each other soon again. Bye.